that. Thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the motion as set out in the order paper and tabled by myself and the member for Lewisham East, and also supported by 30 other members. It is truly a cross-party resolution and is also supported by members throughout the United Kingdom. I believe this reflects the seriousness of the subject matter and the desire, the settled desire of the House to have the opportunity to debate this. Madam Deputy Speaker, you might think that things had improved in the Horn of Africa. You might think that if you only followed the media. But unfortunately, it has not. The food crisis has, I'm afraid, got much, much worse. Last week, the UN made its announcement that a sixth region of Somalia has entered the famine. There are now 750,000 people at risk, and they estimate that $2.5 billion is required to prevent this starvation escalating. And there is currently a $950 million shortfall without even estimating what the needs are beyond December 2011. But despite these uncertainties, the UK has led the international response. Despite the many difficulties, economic difficulties, that we all have at home, the UK government has led, and I believe it should be commended for that. It has, as it has set out to, not tried to balance the books on the backs of the poorest, and it has contributed £188 million. I believe that the UK public's generosity, those individual gifts that they have made, reflects their support for the government in this generosity. By the end of last week, they had given £57 million, which is greater than the governments of France, Germany, Italy, Russia and Switzerland put together. The UK government, though, has a responsibility to both the general public, who have given so much, and to the citizens of the Horn of Africa, who have so little, to ensure that this money really delivers. Madam Deputy Speaker, famines are political. Now, we all know that the immediate response to a famine has to be food, aid, shelter. But I think we should also look hard at what else can be done earlier on. Because it is not a lack of food. It's not the lack of food, but because some people cannot get access to the food that causes the famine. And the main cause of food security in Africa is war and conflict. Famine is about so much more than food. It is about a famine of education, a famine of democracy, a famine of health, a famine of transport, a famine of so many other items. And it is the food famine that becomes a symptom of this vast failure. The last famine in Europe was the Irish potato famine, which was indeed a failure of politics as much as a failure of the agriculture that season. So I believe in this House we should encourage and support the efforts towards conflict prevention through the Foreign Office, through DFID, through any government department. And we can work with the organisations who are already settled in these societies to try to do that. Now, I am aware that external interventions in fragile states are fraught with risk. We know that they can make things worse. So we must nevertheless, I believe, be bold. We must try always to support good governance so that we can try to promote the emergence of civil society. As the Nobel Prize winner, Professor Amartya Sen, famously noted, there are no famines in democracies which have a free press. We can and should help support organisations that help with building a free society. That is the true version of early prevention to a famine. But we also mustn't lose sight of the help that we can give to building agricultural resilience to famine. Because agriculture is the lifeblood of the national economies of the Horn of Africa. In 2009, 50% of the GDP of Ethiopia was agriculture, 22% in Kenya, 60% in Somalia. The majority of the labour force in these countries work in rural areas. 80% are smallholders, working in less than 2 hectares. Now, when you consider that the Palace of Westminster is itself 3 hectares, you begin to get a feeling what a small area they have to work in, how precarious they're living in. And I think that we should try to focus our support to the organisations that are working with these small farmers, these micro-scale producers, who can produce so much a greater yield than the large monoculture farms. 7 out of 10 of the world's hungry are members of these small rural households. The UK public, generous as it has been, expects results from UK aid. Now, I welcome once more the huge international effort that the UK has been so supportive of in providing immediate famine relief. That is saving lives day by day. But we must also focus on the long-term agricultural resilience, helping communities to improve their yield. If we do that, if we can help them build up their own incomes, then we also help them towards building up their own civil societies. A community that has a surplus can themselves invest in their own education, in their own health service. And so we have the twin benefit of helping with the production of agriculture, helping communities create their own incomes, and thereby building from the bottom up the start of a civil society that can then provide the stability of a democracy that is less likely to go into famine. It is complex, we all know that. When you start talking about famines, people will start listing, as I have, the many different elements to it. But we must not let the complexity of this subject put us off. We must continue, as we have been, to put our efforts into prevention and trying to work with the famine as it is at the moment, but above all, trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again by supporting people so that they can have their own civil society emerge. Yeah.